thanks for intro, and thank you for sticking around. So yeah, as Philip mentioned, I am Jan, or Honza, whatever you prefer. And I work at Muse on the public API. Muse, if you don't know that company, we build property management systems, so it's like hotels, central heart, central brain, and the public API allows basically like integrations, our partners to connect and bring some additional value to our users. So APIs connecting systems and interoperability are sort of my thing. But a word of warning, actually there will be 2 warnings. What I will be speaking about today isn't something we use at Muse, maybe yet. And also second warning, this talk is a little bit longer because it was originally for Web Expo conference. Please be kind if it will be too much for you. Feel free to go for beer or something to eat. Anyway, before Muse, I spent a lot of time working with APIs, particularly around social media. And even during my time at the university, I even studied social media, sort of. And back then, when I studied, social media were big, and many people had like a lot of hopes over them, like Twitter will bring like a democracy to all corners of the world. You remember, right? Even back then, some people were trying to build some alternatives to those big social media. And curiously, like 10 years ago, on this conference, I spoke about decentralized social media. And back then it was like a curiosity, like no one considered it like would have like real chance of adoption. It was like, hey, look at these folks, they are building like a decentralized alternative to Twitter and it's fully open source. And they don't have any funding, like, that's fascinating, huh? Anyway, 2 years ago, this guy bought Twitter. And suddenly many people started to be interested in alternatives to Twitter. And in all this madness, one little project got a lot of attention. So mainstream media talked about Mastodon as this open source Twitter alternative. And now let's do a quick poll. I mean, I barely see you, but okay, so raise your hand if you have an account on Mastodon or some other one. That's a lot of you. And now, keep your hand up if you had an account on Mastodon server before 2022. You see? So, yeah, that's Elon Musk effect. Thanks to him. Anyway, Mastodon uses this protocol called ActivityPub. And, well, personally, I'm quite excited about ActivityPub because one reason is that I'm a happy user of Mastodon and other social media software based on ActivityPub. The reason is that I have a wide choice of applications. I can experiment like with different interfaces, different applications without like really abandoning my social network. But more importantly, these applications, they respect me. I can engage with social media on my terms, and like really most of these projects aren't designed to grab my attention at all costs because like they are not monetized in this traditional social media way, like where they try to keep your eyeballs focused on the display because like they will serve you more ads. Really, they respect me as a user, and I can engage on my own terms. But ActivityPub and its ecosystem is also attractive for me as a developer. So the reason is that there isn't like a single company which tells me like what I can and cannot build, and maybe they decide to just like kill my application because they don't like the icon or the name or something. And they don't really, there isn't like a risk of like some company to suddenly change the terms and conditions because the owner suddenly decides to. And yeah, you know who I'm referring to. So to give you an example, you can ask the developers of these popular Twitter clients, Tweetbot and Twitterific. Was anyone using those? Tweetbot, Twitterific? No? No one here, okay. but they were really popular among power users. And it's even curious, like this blue bird icon, this is like what gave this third-party application gave the identity, the blue bird, to the Twitter. They adopted it, and I believe it was Tweetbot which came up with the verb tweet. So this isn't like an invention of Twitter. They adopted it from these third-party apps, and they were a really important part of the ecosystem. So after decades of development, they were suddenly like blocked from Twitter, basically overnight, without any prior warning. Because just like Elon Musk decided like to kill all the third-party applications. And the thing is, like, neither Tabbots nor Icon Factory decided to give up on social media completely. They did something else. They turned to open protocols for the next application. So Tabbots introduced this very polished, very advanced client for Mastodon called Ivory. And Icon Factory, they are currently working on the project Tapestry. They successfully crowdfunded it on Kickstarter, and what's curious about this one, it's something like a newsfeed, but for the open web. So it's not only like federated social media, like Mastodon and ActivityPub, but you can even like weave in like blogs into this single timeline, RSS feeds, all that stuff. So really this shows like this development towards like how they, after being burned so badly by like this proprietary centralized platform, how they turn to the open web. And really, if there is one thing I want to remember from this talk, is that this thing, ActivityPub, I'm sort of like pitching to you, it's not like a new social media product or platform owned by a single vendor. It's an open, standardized protocol. And its goal isn't to replace existing social media, but bring their capabilities to the web itself. And that's what makes me most excited about ActivityPub. It's a foundation which enables us to build like new experiences, new stuff on the web, but in interoperable way. And well, that was really long intro. So let's see what else I have prepared for you in this talk. First, I will explain a bit closer what this federation and Fediverse you are hearing about and how it relates to ActivityPub. Then I will show you what's being built with ActivityPub and how it looks like in action. Then we will look at inner parts of ActivityPub. This will be a bit technical. And I will even try a little demo. Hopefully it will work. So there are some topics which I won't cover in this talk. Maybe you have heard about like this specific culture on the Fediverse. Maybe you have experienced it yourself. And yeah, it attracts like a certain sort of people, which in my opinion are mostly very nice and cool people. But maybe you have some different opinions. Also, I won't talk much about like Meta and Threads.net Federation because it's sort of like controversial topic among ActivityPub developers. Because you know, like Meta, to be honest, it's a controversial company which systematically chooses profits over users' well-being. So yeah, of course, there's some controversy around it. And I also want to dig into comparison between AT protocol, which is used by Blue Sky. It has some very interesting properties, but most of them are on the paper because Blue Sky still, despite all of its popularity, there's still just like Blue Sky and there isn't any federation about it. That being said, I will be happy to talk about these topics and anything else with you after my talk. Ideally with some beer. So, let's talk about ActivityPub. What is it? Well, it's a standard specified by W3C, the World Wide Web Consortium. And when you look into the specification for ActivityPub, it starts with this sentence. ActivityPub protocol is a decentralized social networking protocol. I will actually get to the rest of it later. But the keyword here is decentralized. And different people have different idea what decentralized means. So let's clear this up. Maybe you know this classic image. It's actually from 1962 from a paper on distributed communication networks by Paul Baran. And it shows different topologies of networks. And the decentralized topology is in the middle. And we can apply this to social media as well. So let me illustrate. I typically like to start by asking, like, where's the user? Technically, those aren't like just humans. We think more of them like clients connecting to this network. But centralized network, I mean, we are familiar with them, right? This is Facebook, this is Instagram, Twitter. If I want to talk to my friend, I will go through this centralized node in this network. Now, in decentralized network, we don't have like a single central point through which we connect. Well, we have in this diagram, so let me fix it because it shows like a hierarchical network. So let's add like a few more lines to make it like fully decentralized. Anyway, we are connecting to these intermediaries, in this case servers, which can talk to each other. So when I want to connect to my friends, they can be on other servers. Now, distributed networks, those are interesting beasts. But the connection here is like truly peer-to-peer, and they are using servers and some like permanently online nodes, mostly for convenience. Like, for example, when your peer goes offline, so you can still like access the data. And there are projects building distributed social media. Maybe you heard about Nostr or Secure Scuttlebutt, but I will be getting into those. So ActivityPub represents this model of networking, with users connecting to servers and each server communicating with other servers through defined protocols. So this is what we call federation. And it's not really like a new concept, but it gets pretty interesting when we apply it to social media. So let me illustrate it through contrast. Once again, consider centralized service something we know, love, or hate. For example, Twitter. And like, of course, like Twitter isn't like a single physical server, but it's a single platform which holds all the content and all the accounts. Now, if you'd like to say communicate from Twitter to users on Substack nodes, well, it's not possible. Like these services are close to the outside world, and I mean like that. Like why would you even talk to like Substack nodes users, right? Well, but what if you actually could talk to people on another service without even like having an account there? And this might be actually familiar, right? I mean, this is how email works. Like, imagine like the opposite, right? When you start typing an email and you are like, oh, but they are using Gmail, so I can send them an email from my Proton account. And that sounds kind of ridiculous, right? Like to think like what email software like your recipient uses. So email is a federated technology. Each email server may be implemented like in a completely different way, but all the email servers communicate through these established protocols like SMTP. And ActivityPub applies this concept to federation to social media. So if two users have accounts on different Mastodon servers, they are able to talk to each other, right? That's what I sort of established. However, what's important, it doesn't have to be just Mastodon. We have other applications for microblogging which can talk with Mastodon. We have applications and plugins for blogging or microblogging, publishing long articles, if you will. We have applications for discussions. And we have applications dedicated to sharing media. And all of them can interact with each other through ActivityPub. And this is what we call the Fediverse. It's a collection of servers talking to each other, mostly through ActivityPub. There are some other protocols, but ActivityPub is by far the most dominant. And, well, as you can guess from these logos, there are quite a few applications already. So before I talk more about them, let me clarify a few terms. So these applications like Mastodon, Lemmy, PeerTube, Write Freely, those are server software. And most of these projects are open source, but there are some exceptions. But to use them, you actually need to deploy them on some server. The server running a particular software in the federation is an instance. So maybe you decided to create your account on mastodon.social, or maybe you are using some Czech server like Mastodon Czech or Twitter says that. So you can choose which instance to join. Some instances are general enough, some are like specialized, maybe for some geographic regions or some specific interests. And you can also run the instance yourself, maybe just for yourself or your friends. Of course, like with proprietary applications like threads, there is just like a single instance that probably will be forever. And actually, how you interact with the Fediverse is handled through the client application. So most of these server applications come with some built-in user interface, but there are also typically some third-party clients. That's especially true for Mastodon. There are like wide variety of third-party clients you can choose from. I mentioned Ivory, but there is also, for example, Tusky for Android, or you have even some multi-server applications which can connect to different server applications like Fedilab. But the problem here is that like each server application, that it has like its own client API, and your client application needs to support it. So to reiterate, we have server software which is deployed to instances, and you connect to these to the instance through your client application. The server software running on your instance, it facilitates the interaction with users on other servers. It stores incoming and outgoing data, and your client displays them. So basically, your home instance is like where all your like followers, what you are following, and what they are publishing to you. That is where it is stored and where your client gets it. So let's talk about some use cases for ActivityPub. And well, I tried to collect them, and I could just like spend the rest of the talk going through like each application and each use case here. But if you just like glance on this list, you will notice that most of them are related to social media or web publishing in general. So really, we could break it down to these 4 points. You can follow and be followed. You can build your social graph. You can publish content to your followers and even like a larger network, like a public posts. You can react to these posts, like them, repost them, comment, and so on. And of course, the content somehow gets distributed to you so you can view it. Of course, when you follow someone, you want to see their post ideally. And you can actually hide a lot of under these 4 activities. And it's applicable to any social media, and that's no coincidence. So Evan Prodromou, which is one of the authors of ActivityPub, and he's called like the father of the Fediverse, he works like on a lot of standards in this area, and he put it this way. In Fediverse, you don't have to make a screenshot to share something from one network into another network. It's all connected. But yeah, it sounds nice in theory, but how does it look in practice? So let me give you an example of interaction between a WordPress blog and Mastodon instance. And sorry for this example, I made it before CEO of Automatic, Matt Mullenweg, went completely apeshit. If you know about WP Engine drama, if you don't, you can ask me later. Anyway, so I registered for a free blog on WordPress.com, but there is also ActivityPub plugin you can install on your self-hosted WordPress if you have one, and it gives you this like magical switch called Enter the Fediverse. And what this makes possible, it makes your blog accessible to ActivityPub-enabled software like Mastodon. So now I can follow the blog from my Mastodon account. And when I publish some blog post, it appears on my feed. And you may say, well, I mean, like there have been like forever applications for reposting like RSS feeds on Twitter or like some social media tools like that. So why I would need an ActivityPub for that? Well, the nice thing here is that this interaction goes both ways. So if I reply to that post on Mastodon, it appears as a comment on the original blog post. So if your blog is part of the Fediverse, you still have one place where people can engage with your content. And this is particularly interesting for publishers. So The Verge, I'm pretty sure you're familiar with Verge, and maybe some of you with even 404 Media. So these two publishers, and there are even more like ProPublica, they are planning to federate with their sites to help them reach broader audience without reliance on closed platforms like Facebook, like Instagram, like Substack. And really it gets back to this idea of protocols over platforms. You can invest resources into your site rather than building presence on some other platform which will seek ways to profit from your content at the publisher's cost. And another example where we are just starting to explore some opportunities is in software development. So, do you know GitLab? Like, raise your hand. I'm pretty sure most of you heard about GitLab, right? So, a lot of open source projects host their own instance of GitLab. And what's interesting, GitLab is building this ActivityPub integration, so which allows collaborating across instances. So imagine you have account on one GitLab instance, and when you want to send a pull request, instead of like creating account on another instance, you can just like go from your home instance and send a pull request there. Or even report issues or follow activity. So that's pretty interesting. There's another project in this area called Fortran, which actually goes a little bit further. They are trying to establish protocol specifically for these software forges like GitLab built on top of ActivityPub. And this protocol is being implemented by PragueJS. This is yet another open source alternative to GitHub. It was from Git. Really not many people familiar with here. But maybe you heard about CodeBerg, which is probably like the largest instance of PragueJS. And they are just like, it's definitely like they're on their roadmap, but they are just like exploring opportunities in this area. And I think this makes like really sense, because when you think about it, like we call Git distributed version control system. But when it comes to GitHub and these like centralized software forges, they are like really centralized, right? Suddenly, like when GitHub stops working, like we cannot report issues, we cannot send pull requests. And so I think this is like really interesting way how to like re-decentralize software development, especially in open source projects, through like this federation across different software forges. So this brings me to my final point in my presentation, how ActivityPub works behind the scenes. So this will be a bit technical, but maybe if you want to remember one information, I really like to think about ActivityPub as this, really those are like basically JSON files pointing to other JSON files. But if we go a little bit deeper, let's bring up the abstract from the ActivityPub standard. So you saw this introduction already, but here's the rest of it. ActivityPub is based upon activity streams data format, and it provides a client-to-server API as well as federated server-to-server API. So ActivityPub has actually two parts, client-to-server and server-to-server APIs. So I mentioned this problem where like each server has its own client API, and this client-to-server API was supposed to solve this problem, and it's part of the specification. The problem here is it's not like widely implemented, but in theory, if it were, you would be able to build like a generic ActivityPub client, which would be able to belong to any generic ActivityPub server. But we are not there yet. Currently, we have these server-specific APIs, which are tightly coupled with which couples client with the server. The part which is widely implemented, and I will show you, is server-to-server communication. And the key to understanding ActivityPub is through this activity streams format. So, ActivityPub is based on activity stream, which is format for describing well, activities, right? So what's an activity? Let me give you an example. Look at this statement. Alice created a note. This is what we call an activity. And this activity has three parts. We have Alice, which is actor. We have a verb or type, which is created. And we have an object, a note. And you can basically describe any social media activity like that. To give you another example, here's Bob followed Charlie. And again, we have actor, which is Bob. The verb here is follow, and the object is yet other actor. So this is activity streams in a nutshell, but this is like the idea. How do we represent it? Well, we represent it typically as JSON, and we use this specific format called JSON link data. Maybe you run into JSON link data if you were like dealing with SEO or rich snippets for Google or in emails. So yeah, it's the same thing. And what's interesting about JSON LD, it gives you like a lot of flexibility how you can represent your JSON. It's extensible in a similar way like XML actually, which probably isn't nice comparison. But the nice thing here is like it's not like really forced upon you. You can still interpret JSON LD file as like a regular JSON. But if you want to treat it as like a JSON LD, it gives you some nice properties in advance. So let's take a look at some actual code. This is how an object is represented in activity streams. And we can see it's a node, right? We have type node. The add context is basically how you identify that this is JSON LD. It gives you like this context where your properties are taken from. And on the bottom we have property content. And there are some extra stuff I will talk about. Typically this object is wrapped in activity of type create. So we have our actor there, which is social.example/Alice. We have a verb, which is type create, and the object here is embedded, which is on what I showed you on the previous slide. We also have addressing to this strange URL. When you look at it, there is this to, and then there is w3.org activity streams public. This is a URL which means this activity is public. It's part of the specification, and also in JSON LD we are typically using these URLs as like like a globally unique identifier, basically. Also, we don't have to embed the object. We can reference it through URL. So this is actually power of JSON LD, where you can, instead of like embedding everything, you can decide maybe to reference some parts which can be referenced from other parts. So really, JSON pointing to other JSON. I told you that. So we saw activity streams represented in JSON LD, but in practice we use other standards in addition to ActivityPub. We particularly use WebFinger for user discovery. Yes, I'm bringing yet another link, but WebFinger is pretty simple. And I will show you it in a short moment. And we also use HTTP message signatures to verify requests, because you need to have some mechanism to identify, yeah, this request actually is coming from the user who is claiming to be that user. Both of these standards aren't covered by ActivityPub itself, but they are de facto standards in the Fediverse, because Mastodon started using it and everyone wants to be compatible to Mastodon, so they had to adapt to it. But it's very possible that they will become like a built-in, like a standard part of the next version of ActivityPub. So this brings me to demo. I will show you how profile discovery works, what does the actor profile looks like, and how to publish a piece of content. I have most of the code prepared, so hopefully it will work. And before I go to that, I will talk a little bit about profile discovery. And profile discovery, I mean this. Maybe you are familiar with these handles, like these strange handles, like you have a username part and add some server. So this is nice, but when we have this, we actually need some way how to translate it to the user's URL, like where we can find that specific user, that specific actor. And ActivityPub doesn't tell us how to do that. This is where we use WebFinger, and this is standard, which uses this .well-known URL. So you will ask server for this specific URL encoded account, and it should respond to you like with some short JSON telling you, yeah. So if you want more details about this particular user, go to this URL. So this gives you like this extra layer of indirection if you want to implement your server in specific way. This is basically like the only hard-coded URL where you need to, which you need to follow. And this brings me to demo. So let's see. Yep. Right. So I am using this website called ActivityPub.academy, which is this modified instance of Mastodon with some extra neat features for learning and exploring ActivityPub. And they have this part called ActivityPub Explorer. And I can put some, for example, let's start with the profile discovery. So I will put TC39. By the way, do you know what TC39 is? No. No?
The body for Java.
Yes, thanks. So this is official account for ECMAScript committee. I mean, I'm on PragueJS, so I was trying to come up with something relevant. Yeah. So when I entered the handle here, it got automatically translated to this WebFinger address. And here I got some links. So this is from the WebFinger specification, and I'm typically mostly interested in this link of relations self. Now there are some others like subscribe where I can actually go to a specific URL, and I can also provide like an avatar here. But if I follow this URL, fostonon.org users TC39, now I'm getting the activity streams description of actor. So this is like the description of our actor. And you can see there's like a lot of stuff. Some of it is specific to Mastodon, because Mastodon has its own dictionary. But but the most important parts are here. I can see the type of this actor, that is person. There's also possibility to have organization. The ID typically corresponds, it's like our URL. It can be typically resolved. I can even check like who are the following followers. This is all on the open web. If you send a request with a specific accept header, this is what the server will respond with. So I can check their followers, for example, and list them. And they also have this inbox and outbox, which is also specified by ActivityPub standard. So outbox is where the users publish their posts. So I can go to the first page, for example, and I can see here like ordered items, and these are all the objects they have published. And the inbox is where I will be able to, for example, send like a reply to their post and so on. Yeah, so there's a lot of it. This is all publicly accessible if your profile is publicly accessible. Now let's try to do something with it. I have an account on this Mastodon instance. It got like randomly generated, and I will post like a new post and try to reply to that. So let's see. Good evening, for example. Right, need to refresh it. Okay, so I have my post here, and let's just copy link and take a look at it in the ActivityPub Explorer. So, this is just the activity I have published. I will pick the ID here, because it's sort of different from what I got before, but this is where I will be, what I will be replying to. Sorry, let me just like paste it. And you can see here again, it's like type of node. It's not like a reply to anything. You can see here even like that it was published like a public post, and carbon copy to all my followers, which there are none, and there is an actual content, which is HTML. I think even the standard specifies like a subset of HTML, which is safe and should be supported by most implementations. So I have really simple ActivityPub server implemented on Glitch. And I wanted to show you only this part, which is responsible for publishing like a reply to some specific node. So here is like really bare bones activity to create node. And I will fill in this in reply to property. I will just like modify it for the latest post. And I will put hello PragueJS here as a content. So yeah, let's see if it works. Hopefully if the terminal loads. No. Let's see. Yep. So looks like a glitch has a glitch. Try it once more. Okay, so I guess I won't show you that. Yeah, that happens. I can maybe show you the implementation of the server a little bit. So there isn't really much. This is like the really minimal implementation with where I can actually I have Fastify server, which provides a few roles. I provide some basic information about my actor, which is like the only account provided on this server. And I also need to implement WebFinger, which only points to the specific actor. So this server actually allows me to even like look up this specific user, which is which is accessible through this handle. So when I go to this instance of ActivityPub, and I will use a search here, which I cannot find actually because this is like a, yeah. So I will paste the handle here, and maybe, yeah. So this is actually the actor on my server. And if I were to follow him, it would post like a request to my server, and I would say, oh, so this user from this server follows me, so I will store it locally on my server, and whenever I publish something, I will go to that, I will publish it to that person who followed me. Let's see if the console, we have the console now. So, I have a deliver.js script, which can be launched directly. Let's see. So I got status 202, which is nice. So I should see the response here. So wait a minute, where are my posts? Yeah. Today's really not a good day for demos, apparently. At least for my demos. Sylvester was doing much better. Yeah. But I think maybe I can go directly to that post I mentioned previously. Yeah, so here it is. Post just like 35 seconds ago. So yeah, at least that worked. Okay. So let's go back to my slides and let's finish it quickly. So I showed you like really the simplest implementation. Sending reply is actually the easiest way rather than like the sending a post to multiple users or followers, because I would have to like resolve their inboxes and post to each of their inbox. And like this can be optimized, but you can probably see that like this could have some bottlenecks. It could be like a limit to scalability, and it's actually like one of the challenges of ActivityPub, like how to scale it to these multiple server-to-server interactions. You can try it yourself. There are many tutorials to build like basic implementations, and nowadays we have even some nice frameworks like Fedify, which really simplify implementation of these like basic interactions and basic implementations of ActivityPub. So let's go to conclusion. If I want to remember one thing, keep in mind that ActivityPub, it's not like a new social media platform, it's not like a new app or product, it's an open standardized protocol. And unlike platforms, protocols, they don't tell you what to build, what you can and cannot do with them. So, in my opinion, it's a more stable foundation to build upon. You can explore different business models and experiment with it. So it provides like a lot of leeway. And really my hope for ActivityPub is that eventually what we see as this specific network called Fediverse becomes the social fabric of the web. And ultimately, I believe maybe ActivityPub or maybe some of its successors could be as big as the web itself. And that's what makes me excited about ActivityPub. So, if you are interested, I have some resources on the first link on my blog. There are some ways how to reach out to me. And yeah, thank you for your attention, and let's go for a beer.
Thanks, Hamza. Do you guys have any questions? And maybe first question from myself. Do you think that it actually has a chance to be accepted by the big players? I know that you mentioned that threads are actually using it already, but is it something you feel like really is the future of the social networks, like to be accepted by all the players?
So I think fundamentally you need to keep in mind that like our understanding what social media is very narrow, because it was shaped like for the past decade by Facebook and Twitter, which gave us this specific idea that like, you know, social network has to be big, it has to be for everyone, it has to be centralized. And I think really this is like completely different mindset. Like ActivityPub really follows more this like small world approach, like okay, you can have big instances, but it's okay also to have like small communities which talk like to some other communities, but maybe not talk to everyone. So, and it's actually, I think it's like healthier model. So yeah, probably on this level, Mastodon and something like that will probably remain a niche. But on the other hand, you mentioned it yourself, Meta had some reason to look into ActivityPub and to look into this idea of federation. There are some like positive views on that and negative views on that. Maybe let's discuss it on the beer. But I would say like from that point of view, ActivityPub already succeeded because it was adopted by like a biggest player in the social media landscape.
I can imagine that some countries or even European Union can push for this kind of protocol because it makes sense to be like more open. But I can't imagine why the companies itself would like to actually use it, especially the big players. Why would they open up their data?
I mean, for ActivityPub, I think it could be actually related. It could sort of like take some heat from them, from the regulators. They can like point out, yeah, but we are already open, we are already federating. So they are sort of like pushing the whole, like even like the future competition towards this area where they like the federation could be like considered something like the default whenever you're like building a new social network. Yeah.
We'll see. Any questions?
I have one question. Maybe now Scuttlebutt?
Scuttlebutt, yeah. Secure Scuttlebutt, yeah. A little bit. I didn't experiment with it. questions or?
But just an experience compared to the one that you are mentioning now. What's your opinion?
Yeah, well, secure scuttlebutt, it's really like truly, I would say the most really distributed and decentralized social media experience. Because even if you want to find some other peers on the network, my understanding is that like you need to use other channels. Like because like when you start there, it's not like really simple to like explore it and find some other people on the network. So I'm not sure like what's the status of secure scuttlebutt now, but I would say it's even more niche. Even for like there's like a really small but dedicated community. My understanding is that, for example, Nostr, which is popular social network for Jack Dorsey, nowadays, like when he abandoned Twitter and Blue Sky, is like something also like distributed, but probably gained like a little bit more adoption.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, like, how good is the interoperability between like the different services? Because, like, for example, one thing that I was trying to solve myself in the past was pixel-fed versus Mastodon.
Right.
Right. I could never wrap my head around like.
Yeah. Thank you for bringing this up. Interoperability is a challenge, but it's not unsolvable challenge. I mean, take a look at web browsers, right? We have like multiple engines, and all of them like are supposed to support like the same websites.
So it is not guaranteed that just because you implement ActivityPub.
Yeah, there are some like specific quirks, like how particular servers implement and interpret ActivityPub. For example, some servers decided to not like go interpret JSON LD like fully as it is. They are specified for performance reasons. So they are not so tolerant in like what data you are sending to them, even though they should be compliant according to JSON LD, activity streams, and ActivityPub. So those are these challenges. How the community like reacts to it is that there is this, I think it's called, I can't remember the name now, but there is this test suite being built for the for the server implementers, where you can basically run this test suite against your ActivityPub implementation, and you can see like how much you are compliant and interoperable. So ideally, where the community is heading or where the development should be heading is that by using this test suite, you could at least see like where are the the known issues among these implementations. So this is definitely like one of the parts which is a challenge, but it's being addressed through this test suite.
No, but that's on a more technical level, right? I mean,
Yes.
more like on an application.
Oh, right, yeah. So that's another challenge actually. For example, Mastodon is tied to understanding only like this activity type node.
Okay.
So yes, so everyone is posting nodes, even though if you can have, for example, like a long form article, which would have like more structure, more markup. So this is also something which is being discussed. I mean, it's a standard. We started somewhere. Mastodon came, it basically, like if you look at the history of ActivityPub, Mastodon basically saved ActivityPub. But nowadays it's rather like limited in its interpretation of what ActivityPub is. And I have this specific slide which shows different implementations for different use cases. And for example, it doesn't make sense to show you, come on, I can find it, to, for example, post podcast at Snows, right? But even we have, for example, like Bookworm for publishing basically an alternative to Goodreads. PixelFed is only for posting photos, or Fungwhale is for posting music. So there are like different implementations, and I believe like we will see different approaches to interoperability. But I would say like mostly the interoperability nowadays is between, especially in this area of microblogging and blogging, and yeah.
And you can probably all remember some unsuccessful standards from the past. So let's see how
So the summary is that while interoperability is possible, whether it's actually implemented is a different story.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
one challenge is implementation, Second challenge is interpretation. For example,
Yeah.
it can be go to the as far as like how do you display that particular piece of content on some other. Even the protocol specifies, like, for example, okay, you can at least provide like some summary, which would be like this basic plain text description of that content, and maybe you can link out to the original page to see it like in its original form if you don't understand this specific activity type.
Cool.